The story opens with Rogue lying injured on the ground. When he sits up, sharp pain surges through his chest, for his ribs are broken. Around him, his companions are scattered, battered, and wounded, while one of them still struggles against the undead. At that moment, the Demon King's authority manifests, summoning countless undead from beneath the earth. In an instant, an entire undead army rises before them. Confronted with this sight, Rogue shifts into his skeleton form. With a cry to his priest companion who had realized the authority, he demands power to fight. The priest responds, granting Rogue strength. Empowered, Rogue charges ahead and begins cutting down the undead one by one. The battle rages on, yet danger looms closer. Behind one of Rogue's companions, the Demon King himself appears and strikes, though the attack is narrowly dodged. Preparing another deadly blow, the Demon King is suddenly countered. The hero severs one of his arms and points his sword forward, declaring the fight at its end. But the Demon King's severed arm regenerates instantly. It lashes forward, gripping the hero tightly. The hero wonders if the enemy is preparing to self-destruct, but Rogue leaps in, smiling at his companion. He slashes through the Demon King's hand and with defiance declares that if death is inevitable, then they would face it together. Rogue unleashes his powerful technique, the transition of the abyss, leaving his allies stunned by the sheer force of his attack. As the dust clears, Rogue is seen barely standing. Relief washes over the hero, who believes him safe, but then notices Rogue's arm has been severed. Even so, the Demon King still remains alive. He taunts them, questioning if all of this was nothing more than a meaningless death. Rogue lashes out with a kick to the Demon King's face, only to be slammed violently to the ground and pinned beneath the enemy's crushing hand. The priest steps forward, granting the hero divine strength. The hero charges, wielding the holy sword and the authority of light, delivering a strike that slices the Demon King in two. His body collapses, crashing to the ground. The priest asks if they are safe, but the hero calls him closer. As the priest rushes over, he sees Rogue's body beginning to regenerate. At that moment, the Demon King speaks again. He asks if they receive the blessing well, admitting his own fluster before revealing that this is how it was meant to be. The hero stares in shock as the Demon King explains that his physical body has already served its purpose and is now collapsing. He declares their victory. His head separates from his body and falls to the earth. Yet, even in his final moments, he delivers his last message. He warns that countless choices await them, that despair will follow, and even when crushed under the weight of responsibility, they must not stop. He prays that their journey finds a different ending than his own, for he and his kind had lived in emptiness and folly. With that, his body dissolves into nothingness. Thus ended the battle between the hero and the Demon King, a clash that determined the fate of the world. In the days that followed, time seemed to blur. The wizard was captured by the headmaster of the magic school and sent back to his studies. The elf set out on a journey home to her distant land. The priest gave his farewells and once again withdrew from the secular world, and the others too returned to their places. The false light faded and life continued under the sun as though none of it had ever happened. Fear retreated from their daily lives. And so an age of peace endured for a long time. More than 150 years later, deep within the forest, Rogue is seen seated beneath a tree. His body, now entirely skeletal, bears the weight of centuries, for he has lived far longer than mortal years should allow. He reflects on the passage of time. Mountains once unshakable have crumbled. Plains have turned to deserts. And the only constant seem to be the stars above and himself. The immortality forced upon him, the so-called blessing from the Demon King, has become a curse that will never fade. He wonders at its purpose, questioning what meaning remains in existence that cannot end, in a life where he must remain alone forever. As he looks upward, a shooting star crosses the sky. In that silent moment, a child wanders into the forest and stumbles upon Rogue. Startled by the sight, the child bears witness to a truth long hidden. 150 years after the fall of the Demon King, the time that had once stopped finally begins to flow again. Rogue is surprised to see the child approaching and thinks about what brings a child here so late at night. The child grabs Rogue and tugs at the cheek, bursting with excitement at the sight of a talking skeleton. Rogue is taken back by the child's excitement. The child keeps pulling at Rogue's cheek for a moment. Rogue gently takes the child's hand and tells the child to stop. Rogue then tells the child that he has seen lost children in the mountains many times, but this is the first to pat him like this. Rogue asks the child if they did not learn to run away when they see something that is not human. The child smiles and explains that she was taught not to judge based on appearances. Rogue is surprised by that answer. Rogue admits that he was getting sentimental for the first time in a while, and then a strange child appeared. Hearing Rogue trouble remark, the child asks the identity of her master and notices Rogue's strange sword. Wondering if Rogue is a knight, Rogue shows his sword and answers that he is an imperial messenger, a courier who travels the country with the emperor's messages. Rogue adds that he is currently protecting the mountain with a cursed sword, but he is not a master. The child grows extremely excited at the news of an emperor's messenger and asks if Rogue must be very strong. Rogue replies that of course he is strong since he is entrusted with the emperor's messages, a task not for everyone, and that it requires knowledge of high-level magic like necromancy. Rogue uses his magic to pull a squeal up from beneath the ground, which amazes the child. The child exclaims that Rogue must be really strong. The child then requests to be taken on as Rogue's disciple, saying she wants to become strong. Rogue is confused by the request. Rogue laughs and refuses, saying he was just bored with repetitive routine and that taking a disciple would be a bother. The child asks in disappointment that the story did not say Rogue would take her on as a disciple. The child pleads more, tapping Rogue's head and calling him stingy, unfeeling, and heartless. Rogue repeats he does not know about the rest, but he is not a master. The child becomes upset by that. The next morning, Rogue lies resting beneath a tree. The child arrives and loudly shouts, startling Rogue into asking if she will not go back home. The child answers that she will not leave until Rogue teaches her swordsmanship. Rogue angrily tells the child to hurry home, warning that her parents will worry, and that a skeleton can be mistaken for a child kidnapping monster. While playing, the child explains that her house burned down and that her parents also died and that her mother told her she had to become strong to survive alone. Hearing the child's story, Rogue feels bad. The child insists that she must become strong and asks if Rogue understands. The way the child turns to Rogue and smiles causes Rogue to see his own reflection in her. Rogue, tired, finally agrees and tells the child he will teach her swordsmanship. The child is astonished and overjoyed. Rogue raises his hand and says that it is unbecoming of a strong woman to keep refusing a child's request. It is revealed that Rogue is a woman, which surprises the child even more. The child asks if Rogue was a woman, which angers Rogue, who remains silent. The child thanks Rogue and resumes playing with the squeal, while Rogue thinks that the Emperor's people have suffered greatly, and that teaching this child to stand on her own will be atonement for failing to deliver the Emperor's message. Rogue begins teaching the child sword play with a wooden sword. When they grow tired, they rest beneath the tree. Rogue summons monsters with magic for the child to fight. The child sometimes chases the monsters and sometimes is chased by them. Later, the two pretend to be ghosts and scare a man until he faints. They tire again and return to sleep beneath the tree with the child's hand resting on Rogue's skeletal hand and the child leaning on Rogue as she falls asleep. Rogue resumes sword training, and over time, the child becomes skilled. The child smiles when she looks at Rogue, and Rogue smiles back. 11 years later, a scene shows a girl bathing in a forest lake. Rogue calls the girl and invites her to eat. The girl answers that she will help right away. While they cook, the girl tells Rogue she has something serious to discuss. Rogue asks what it is and comments that she is suddenly setting the mood. Eating together, the girl explains that the village she once lived in was abandoned after a sudden surge in monsters, that the Empire abandoned it, and that hope there has faded because everyone has given up. Rogue is confused by this news. The girl admits that she has become quite strong. Rogue directly asks if she plans to become a hero. The direct question unsettles the girl. Rogue continues at having taught her for 11 years. Rogue can now see what she is thinking and recalls a friend who wanted to become a hero to help people despite ridicule and doubt, insisting that one does not need qualifications to save people. The girl is very surprised by Rogue's words. Rogue, As the sole successor of the northern-style hunting techniques and her master, presents a dagger to the girl with the hope that she will draw it only with good intentions. The girl accepts the sword with respect. Rogue instructs her to go and save the world, then return, promising to always be there waiting. Prepared to depart, the girl says goodbye and leaves. Rogue wonders how many years it will take, 5 years, 10 years, and resolves to protect the place until the child returns, confident that the child will save the world and come back. After the girl leaves, Rogue feels sad and reflects that the connection had been brief, a past encounter, and that waiting again does not feel as frightening as before. Rogue is interrupted by someone asking if she got lost as well. Distracted, Rogue replies that she is not a master, without looking up. Rogue then turns and sees the girl approaching, now badly wounded, but greeting Rogue cheerfully. Rogue is shocked to see the girl. The girl asks if it has been a while. The girl's one leg is missing, yet she laughs loudly. The girl tells Rogue that the journey had been wonderful, that the Empire was vast beyond imagination, and that she encountered countless new places and things. She admits there were many monsters, and she helped people with the skills Rogue taught her. People began to call her a hero, but the Emperor viewed her as a thorn and ordered her assassination, declaring her an obstacle to imperial power. Rogue suddenly hugs a girl, surprising her. The girl apologizes, saying she feels dizzy, then clings tightly to Rogue while asking if Rogue was well, and if Rogue cried when she was gone. Rogue does not directly answer, and instead says that now Rogue wants to hear the girl's story. The girl briefly recounts the untold parts of her journey. At that moment, soldiers arrive, and one of them angrily curses a Hera brat, saying she should have died peacefully instead of coming to Mountain. Their leader, a knight, orders silence and says they are searching, prompting the angry soldier to apologize. As they advance on the mountain, they spot a figure, and the knight commands the soldiers to pack quickly and descend the mountain. Rogue appears, furious, holding a gleaming sword, and asks if they still think this is a mountain. Rogue summons many monsters that attack the soldiers. Rogue explains that 120 years ago, while traveling the continent as a messenger, she found remnants of the Demon King's army here, tore them apart, and scattered their pieces until the corpses became soil and a forest grew. Rogue says she feared necromancers would misuse the place and has guarded it ever since. But now it seems that guarding is no longer necessary. The summoned monsters brutally kill the soldiers, causing the others to panic. The knight urges everyone to calm down and form up, insisting that a single necromancer can only control a limited number of undead, and that waiting might resolve the situation. Before he can finish, many corpses rise and faces appear, startling the knight. The knight questions the necromancy that can create an army of undead and asks who Rogue is. A monster suddenly severs the knight's head from his neck. Rogue declares herself the mouth of the Emperor and the voice of the Empire, calling on the people of the Empire to heed the messenger's words. Rogue slashes the ground with her sword, ripping the mountain earth open. A child in a nearby village looks toward the mountain, bewildered by the unfolding events. Rogue warns that if the Empire strays from the will of its founder, then the nobles and loyal subjects have the right to set it back on course, and she tells her old homeland to pay the price for its crimes. Rogue's rage unleashed an entire army of demons that chased the soldiers all the way to the village. The soldiers thought they had finally reached safety, but the army followed and began slaughtering them inside the village. In desperation, one of the soldiers cried out that multiple undead had been sighted at the southern outskirts and called for all standby units to assemble immediately. The soldiers fought back against the monsters, some attempting to absorb them, but the battle only grew worse as more explosions erupted and even larger waves of monsters appeared. Panic spread among the soldiers until a man stepped forward, ordering everyone to move aside. He revealed his sword technique and cleaved a monster in half, then moved with blinding speed to cut down several more. After dispatching the monsters, he demanded to know what kind of necromancer could command such an army. His identity was revealed as Imperial Knight Escher Soma. His eyes then fixed on a giant monster upon which Rogue stood, and he immediately understood that she was a necromancer behind it all. Drawing his sword, he thought bitterly of a mage who should hide behind undead, daring instead to face him directly on the front lines. Escher attacked, striking the giant monster's legs. Rogue was startled to see that the blow also left a mark across her own leg. Shocked, she recognized the impossible spear thrust aimed at the leg and remembered the same wound on the child. Realization struck that it was Cher who had done this. Her fury ignited, and she confronted him, demanding to know if he was the one. Her anger consumed her, and she turned her wrath on the village, attempting to destroy everything in sight. Cher rushed to stop her, but she pressed forward, engaging him directly in combat. Their swords clashed, and Cher forced her blade down before countering with a strike of his own. Rogue retaliated with a sudden attack that struck his leg, giving her the upper hand as she overwhelmed him with relentless blows. Ashur fought back, delivering a strike that forced Rogue to retreat. He cursed her, declaring that this was the first time since facing the four knights that he had been pushed this far, and demanded to know what she truly was. Rogue answered with a single word, an avenger, gravely wounded. Esther realized he needed time and tried to stall by pressing her for answers. He mocked her claim of vengeance, saying he had killed so many that it was impossible to know whose revenge she carried. Rogue remained calm and explained that necromancy consumed immense stamina, and that the greater the distance and number of undead, the higher the cost. She raised her hand before him, placing it firmly on his face. Her grip tightened with crushing force as she condemned his pride in killing, declaring that such meaningless power had destroyed the Empire's people and even taken her disciple the hero. Blood streamed from Escher as he struggled under her grip, finally slashing to break free. Rogue evaded and kicked him back against the stones. Breathing heavily, Cher laughed bitterly, calling her a monster who did nothing but whine. He justified the Empire's actions, claiming that all deaths had been necessary for its cause. Rogue replied coldly that his death at her hands would therefore be just as necessary. Escher smirked and declared that it would not be today. A sudden white light descended behind him, startling Rogue. She looked around to see several points in the village where the same light struck. A new figure appeared, locking Rogue's summoned monsters within barrier-like prisons. Commands rang out to install mana relay devices, confirm circuit stabilization, and connect to 155 mana batteries. Preparations for the anti-undead barrier shield were complete, and the mission was declared a success. Ashur grinned as the figure deployed the barrier throughout the village, erasing the undead army one by one. Soldiers cheered as the monsters vanished. Confident, Cher told Rogue that her undead army had been destroyed. He explained that the barrier generator was crafted by the legendary wizard of the hero's party. Praised as the greatest in history 120 years ago, even she would not last long within its reach. Rogue answered calmly that she already knew. She recalled a man who created a fool with a stubborn artisan spirit. Cher was puzzled by her response. Rogue dismissed the loss of her army, stating that she could raise another, and that those who would truly stand with her were not the undead, but the Empire's exploited citizens. She vowed that they would join her in vengeance, and promised that with them she would bring the Empire to its end. Rogue reflected on the days of her hero team, remembering how they hated war, but were forced to seize what others cherished in order to protect their own. Those were days when death was a certainty, and though she thought those times were over, the reality proved otherwise. She wondered if so many lives had vanished for such a future, but could only answer herself with uncertainty. In her skeleton form, Rogue gazed from a distance at the memories of her companions. She questioned what she had been thinking when she once walked onto the battlefield, who she had fought for, and where she was supposed to go in this era without them. With no answer, she kept walking forward. For days after the hero extermination incident, the scene shifted to the northern adventurers' village. Rogue entered a restaurant, holding out a map and asking for directions, explaining she had lost her way while traveling north along the mountains. A customer dismissed her, reminding her this was not a guide office, but the Adventurers Guild. She insisted it was the only place, open, and that she only wanted directions. Before leaving quietly, another man angrily interrupted, calling her bold for barging in, but the first raised his hand to silence him. He remarked that for someone claiming to be a wanderer, Rogue rare blood. He mentioned a grim rumor about a necromancer who had killed knights and ravaged Changtap village across the mountains. Hidden nearby, a masked man listened closely. The customer then speculated aloud about the undead before suddenly throwing a knife at Rogue, which he easily caught with cold fury. She warned him to be careful who he picked fight and slammed her fist into the floor. Beneath the cracked boards, the masked man was revealed with the same knife stabbed into his chest. The customer, unfazed, ordered his men to kill her. 2 attackers rushed forward. Rogue, irritated, reminded them all she had only asked for directions and that what followed would be their fault. One attacker charged with a sword, only to be dodged, struck, and punched into the ground. The second slashed at her, but she caught his blade, grabbed his collar, and flipped him over. As they fell, Rogue turned toward the seated customer, but 2 more attackers rushed at her. She leapt between them, forcing their knives against each other, leaving them stunned. She then slammed both their heads into the ground with her bare hands. With the room cleared, Rogue vanished from sight, startling the customer. He sensed her behind him, drew his sword and attacked, but she dodged and sprang onto the table. Furious, he cut through the wood and pressed forward, thinking through his next strike. Rogue ducked low, grabbed his hand, and forcefully hurled him backward, sending him crashing so hard he broke through the floor. The remaining attackers stared in disbelief, shocked that their leader had fallen in a single blow. Rogue challenged them, demanding to know who would come next. Fear spread among them until a commanding voice stopped the fight. A man approached, telling Rogue to end it there and promising to give her what she wanted. The others whispered in awe, calling him the Guild Master. He introduced himself as Thor Vinland, Guild Master of the Empire's northernmost adventurers guild, and invited Rogue to speak elsewhere. In his office, Thor explained the story of a skeleton said to haunt the mountains behind Chontap village, a tale familiar to every adventurer. Despite many requests to investigate and multiple search parties sent out, none had ever returned with proof. He admitted he had dismissed it as rumor until now. Rogue slammed her fist on his table, breaking it, and told him not to waste her time. She demanded to know what he truly wanted. Thor answered simply. He lit a cigarette and spoke of how the guild had been neglected by the Empire, how villagers abandoned their homes, while others took reckless requests to protect their land only to die in vain. Each day, those who remained trembled in fear, waiting slowly for death to come. Rogue mocked his words, asking why they had not resisted the Empire, saying that if nothing was done, nothing would change. Thor countered that they had not done nothing. They could do nothing. Law and order in the abandoned lands fell to those who remained, and adventurers gathered to protect their homes. Other guilds, too, fought desperately, pouring everything into defending their families, leaving them no better off. Rogue asked if they had never thought to form an alliance to fight the Empire. Thor replied that such a thing would not be simple, for it meant war, where countless people would die. Instead, they waited for someone to save them. That hope arrived in the form of the hero, who lifted them from despair. They embraced that hope, but it failed. And now he realized what they had truly lacked was hatred. Thor declared that it did not matter if their homes were destroyed or if tomorrow never came. If they could kill the Empire, then die would be worth it, for that was war. He requested Rogo's help, promising to assign 2 adventurers immediately and later gather all their resources to support her. Avenger or demon, it did not matter. He and his people wanted to join her war. Rogue, unsettled by his plea, apologized for destroying his guild and admitted it was also her fault for abandoning the Empire until the village had fallen into ruin. She revealed that it had been 150 years since she last accepted a request. Placing an item on the table, she revealed her Ruby-class adventure tag, a rank long extinct since the Great War. Thor stared in shock, realizing her true standing. As she left, Rogue told him not to mind it, for she was only a wraith of a filthy past. She accepted his request and declared her first destination would be the northern mountain range, the most dreadful range on the continent, where snow never ceased to fall. The next scene opened high in the mountains, where Rogue traveled with 2 men from the guild. She asked how long it had been since they left the village, and one of them replied while peering through a magnifying glass that this was the 5th day of discreet movement along the mountain range. Rogue noted the fast pace for a secretive march, and he explained that they could not afford to run into the Imperial army. She agreed, then pointed toward a group ahead and questioned who they were and how they had gotten in front. The man explained they were not a search party, but survivors from Changtap village, joined by looters returning to the capital. Another added that judging by their lack of winter gear, they had likely been cut off while moving along the range. Rogue turned to a man crouching nearby and asked what lay along the lower path. He introduced himself as Muron and his companion as Sword Harriet, urging her to at least remember their names. He explained that the lower road passed by small households that would likely be raided for supplies. Harriet added that plundering was common for imperial knights since the current emperor had taken the throne. Rogue stated that she must end them. Her words alarmed her companion, but before he could react, she vanished from sight. She descended rapidly and struck the Ludders, her sudden attack causing confusion. One shouted about a commotion. Another questioned if it was an ambush, and Rogue confirmed it was. From above, one of her companions asked if she was desperate to die, but Moran told him the man was already dead. Down below, soldiers hurried to alert their chief about the intruder. Rogue fought fiercely, surrounded on all sides. A female soldier shouted for her troops to block the retreat and surround the enemy. But before she could continue, Rogue appeared behind her and decapitated her. She mocked her words, repeating them with anger, holding the head on her sword and staring into its empty eyes, remarking that they were nothing but decoration. She summoned a monstrous army that overwhelmed the soldiers. Her allies watching from above realized that the power she had shown at the Adventurers' Guild had not been her full strength. The monsters crushed the enemy forces as Rogue herself cut down heads in rage, declaring the wraith of Changtap village. Seeing the battle nearly decided, Moran told a companion that the tide had turned and they should go down. Rogue sat upon a monster horse surrounded by the corpses of fallen soldiers. When one soldier attacked from behind, she dodged, countered with a kick, and broke his mask. As he fell, a pendant slipped from his neck. The sight of it triggered a memory. Long ago, a man had handed her the same pendant as a token of apology for doubting her. Embarrassed, he had explained that it was a charm made by his daughter, wishing for an adventurer's safe return. Rogue had accepted it gladly, promising to thank her, but the man had revealed that his daughter was killed by the Imperial Army 2 years earlier. She had apologized for her careless words, but he told her not to, explaining that everyone there carried wounds, cursed the Empire, and burned their remaining lives for revenge. He had warned her not to ruin her life with the same hatred, reminding her that someone was always waiting for everyone in the world. The memory ended as Rogue stared at the pendant. In her thoughts, she begged Skull not to go too far. Nearby, a monster struck at the heart of a soldier. As he fell, he gasped apologies to his daughter Michelle before dying. Rogue silently watched, then swiftly avenged him by killing the monster. Moran and his companion joined her, praising her efforts and promising to handle the cleanup so she could rest. They explained that corpses would be needed to create undead, but Rogue gave no reply. Instead, she stood silently as they began burning the bodies. Moran remarked that she was odd, choosing cremation instead of raising undead. Harriet added that her expression carried sorrow, though he could not say for whom. Still, she remained quiet, staring at the flames. From within her, the voice of her own darkness emerged, mocking her with cruel words. It reminded her that despair had only begun and that her choices would drive her deeper into it. It told her that she could not escape fate. Rogue tried to silence it, demanding the dead remain in the underworld, but the voice only laughed, taunting her further. She listened in silence, unable to drive it away.